They didn't lie to you because they were afraid of you. They lied because they knew you'd believe it. Welcome to the first law, the foundation upon which every illusion is built. The law of fabricated truth. You see, the most powerful weapon ever created was not a gun. It was not the atom bomb. It wasn't even religion, or gold, or fear. It was this: if you repeat a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. But what they didn't tell you is who decided what truth was in the first place. Because if you trace every accepted truth, every sacred rule, every historic fact, every unquestionable narrative, you find a committee, a room, and behind that room, a darker one, and behind that, a whisper, a decision, and a pen. That pen, it didn't record what happened. It replaced it. Chapter 1. Truth was never yours to begin with. Let's go back, not to the beginning of your life, that's too recent. Let's go back further, before nations, before printing presses, before alphabets, back when truth wasn't written, it was spoken, and those who controlled the storyteller controlled the world. That's where it began. The manipulation wasn't technological, it was primal. It was about belief. What is a belief? It's a truth you never chose, but one you were made to feel. And once it feels real, it doesn't matter if it's a lie. This is the law of fabricated truth. It's not a tactic. It's not a trick. It's a structure, a latticework of control, so deep that even the ones who enforce it don't know it exists. They think they're doing good. They think they're preserving order, but they are the first slaves of the machine, and so were you. Section 1. Your first lie. The benevolent world. Let's start simple. What's the first thing they teach a child? That the world is safe, that people are mostly good, that truth rises like cream in milk, that if you're honest, you'll be rewarded, that justice is blind, that leaders protect, that history is accurate. Do you feel that? That little pull in your stomach? That's not guilt. That's recognition. You already know they lied. You've seen the exception too many times. You felt it, the punishment for telling the truth, the silence that follows the inconvenient question, the way the world turns when you speak. Honestly, but not correctly. You were trained to believe in a kind world because that belief makes you manageable. But the real world is not kind. The real world is made of interests. And those interests don't care about truth. They care about perception. Because truth doesn't win. Perceived truth does. And once that becomes the rule, lies aren't just allowed. They're designed fabrication. Factories, the machinery of manufactured belief. Let's talk about institutions. You think governments exist to manage resources. You think schools exist to educate. You think news exists to inform. No, they exist to construct belief. Systems, narratives, frameworks, boundaries, not to tell you the truth, but to tell you what the truth is allowed to be. A child learns history from a book, but who wrote that book? Who funded it? Who approved the curriculum? Who hired the teacher? Who threatened the job of the one who deviated? Every step is filtered. You don't learn history. You learn a curated identity. A psychological map that says, this is who we are. This is what matters. This is what's evil. And this right here, is what you must never question. That's not education. That's narrative installation. A software update for the human mind. Language as a cage. How words became weapons. Let me show you how deep this goes. You don't just think in words. You experience the world through them. So what happens if someone redefines those words? What happens if they take the word freedom and make it mean obedience to law? Or the word science and make it mean government-approved conclusions? Or the word justice and make it mean whatever the ruling class calls punishment? You start to believe you're free. Even when you're shackled, you believe you're informed. Even when you're blind, you believe you're moral. Even as you enforce evil. This is not theory. This is not opinion. This is linguistic warfare. And it works because you were never given the original meanings. You were born into a predefined vocabulary, a limited dictionary, a script, and if you dare rewrite it, you're labeled mad, dangerous, unhinged, because truth is no longer discovered. It's per myth cost of believing lies. The psychological prison. Let me ask you something. What's worse, being lied to, or building your entire identity on that lie? Most people will choose to defend the lie. Why? Because if the lie dies, they die with it. This is the real power of fabricated truth. It doesn't just infect your beliefs. It infects your sense of self. It makes you tie your ego to fiction. It makes you fight to defend the chains that bind you. This is why whistleblowers are hated. Not because they're wrong, but because they threaten the ego identity of the masses. Because to admit they're right would mean you were wrong. For years, maybe your whole life, and very few people are strong enough to destroy the tower they built their sanity in. So they don't, they double down. They call the truth a lie, and the lie the sacred norm, controlled opposition, the safety valve of rebellion. But wait, what about all the activists, the truth tellers, the journalists, the rebels? Here's what you need to understand. They built them too. The system doesn't just fabricate truth, it fabricates resistance. They know human beings need to feel like they're rebelling, so they give you the rebels. Pre-approved, branded, funded, visible. The truth movement is often just a pressure valve, a way to keep the dissatisfied from exploding. You don't overthrow the system by playing in its sandbox. You overthrow it by realizing the sandbox was the lie. The law of fabricated truth doesn't just own the narrative, it owns the counter-narrative, and that is the final lock. Breaking the law, the path to inner sanity. So where does this leave you? In ruins? In despair? No, it leaves you awake, because once you see the mechanics, once you feel the structure of deception, you become something rare, a person who sees through the world, instead of just in it. You'll lose things, friends, comfort, naivety, but you'll gain something far more powerful, clarity. And in a world like this, clarity is rebellion. To question is to cut the thread. To observe is to break the spell. To stand alone in truth is to become immune to the great fabrication. And that, my friend, is where your power begins. They didn't bury the truth. They priced it in silence. You're here because something inside you refuses to sleep. A shadow in your thoughts. A fracture in the glass they told you was whole. You were taught that truth was free, but the real cost was what it demanded of you when you found it. Silence is the most valuable currency in the world. Not gold, not oil, not votes, but silence, because silence protects the lie, empowers the liar, and damns the one who dares speak. In this chapter, we uncover the second mechanism of control, the enshrined, systematic, ritualistic worship of silence. They didn't just teach you what to say, they taught you what never to say, and in doing so they turned you into your own jailer. Asterisk, the ritual of unspoken things. There are things you are not allowed to question. You know what they are. Everyone does. But no one says them out loud. The forbidden questions, the missing pieces, the inconsistencies you've noticed since childhood but learned to pretend weren't there. Why? Because silence was rewarded, and speaking, it cost you something. A job, a friend, a father's approval, a crowd's acceptance. They didn't have to threaten you. You threatened yourself, because the rules were burned into your skin, not by chains, but by fear of exile. Every society has its holy silence, the things it would rather kill for than confront. And every empire begins its decay the moment silence becomes law. How silence was monetized. But here's the darker truth. Silence wasn't just cultural. It was engineered. They figured out something. Centuries ago, you can control millions if you just teach them what not to say. This is the real reason. Censorship exists, not to protect society, but to train obedience. You were trained to self-censor. Before you ever understood language, look at your earliest memories. What happened when you told the truth that embarrassed your family? What happened when you noticed something off in school? What happened when you asked a question that made the room go quiet? You learned fast. You learned to edit yourself, to smile, to nod, to pretend. But silence isn't neutral. Silence is complicity. And once a population is complicit, the lie becomes permanent. Whispers that were erased, the fate of the loud look. At history, the ones who broke the silence, what happened to them? They were burned, lynched, discredited, institutionalized, erased, not because they were wrong, but because they were right to. Early Galileo, Hypatia, Tesla, Manning, Snowden, the nameless ones who whispered what they saw and paid in blood. In exile, in mockery, the system doesn't care how right you are. It only cares if your truth threatens the design, and if it does, you will be punished. Not by the elites, not always, but by your neighbors, your co-workers, your own family, because silence isn't just enforced from the top, it's policed from the bottom. Asterisk, social execution, the violence of niceness. Let's talk about modern silence. It's not brutal anymore. It's polite now. If you speak the wrong truth, you're not burned. You're uninvited, blocked, unfollowed, laughed at, called too much, labeled problematic, deemed dangerous to the conversation. They say you're angry. They say you're bitter. They say you've changed. And in saying that, they mean you broke the silence. Because the most powerful lie is the one everyone agrees to ignore. Modern control doesn't need guns. It needs manners. Say nothing. Smile often. Forget what you saw. That's the mantra of the obedient. The internalization of the gag. You may think you're free, but ask yourself, when was the last time you said exactly what you believed, out loud, without apology, without editing yourself in real time? If you can't remember, then the system doesn't need to silence you. You're doing it for them. This is the genius of it. You become your own censor, your own handler, your own prison guard. They gave you the chains and convinced you they were decorations. You think twice before you speak. You audit your opinions. You soften your voice. And every time you do, you trade truth for approval. The sacrament of silence in institutions. Look at the pillars of power in government. Whistleblowers are silenced or jailed. In religion, abuse is hidden for the sake of the faithful. In media, dissent is buried, called disinformation. In academia, research is throttled, if it contradicts the sponsor in medicine. Alternative views are erased if they threaten the funding. Each one claims to be a guardian of truth, but each one requires silence to survive. They're not broken, they're designed that way. It's not a glitch, it's the blueprint, because once silence becomes sacred, truth becomes blasphemy. Breaking the sacred contract, here's where it gets dangerous. If you speak, you will lose things. This is the price of disobedience. You will lose applause. You will lose safety. You will lose certainty. But you will gain something far more powerful. Real freedom. Not the freedom they sold you. Not the freedom with a leash. But the freedom of a mind that can't be owned. When you break the silence, you break the spell. And when one voice rises, others begin to remember their own. That's why they fear the truth teller. Not because of his volume, but because of the echo. Final words spoken like a warning or a blessing. You are not here to be liked. You are not here to be safe. You are here to see, to say, to survive the silence. Truth without courage dies, but courage without silence becomes unstoppable. Welcome to the second law. Belief isn't what you choose, it's what you're allowed to keep. There is no belief that's truly yours, only the ones you were permitted to have, the ones that slipped through the net, the ones that didn't threaten the design. Let me show you how they built the cage, not with bars, not with threats, but with meaning. Because if they can control what you believe, they never need to control what you do. That's what this chapter is about. Not the lies they told, but the mental structure they designed to hold them. The architecture of belief. This is the invisible cathedral you've been living in since birth. Its walls are your assumptions. Its roof, your moral instincts. Its foundation, everything you never dared to doubt. But today, we take the wrecking ball to its doors. Belief as a program. The soft code of civilization. Look closely. Beliefs behave like code. They run in the background. They update automatically. And most of them, you didn't install yourself. You didn't choose to believe that certain nations are good, that certain people are dangerous, that certain ideas are extreme, that certain behaviors are normal, that success looks a certain way, that morality means compliance. Those beliefs were installed by schools, by culture, by repetition, by fear, like a virus, not to liberate you, but to standardize you, because a society of predictable minds is easier to govern than a world of wild thinkers. The blueprint of the box, how belief is contained. Here's the trick. They don't need to control your beliefs directly. They just need to control the range of what you're allowed to believe. Think of it like a box. They let you argue inside it. Left versus right, traditional versus progressive, science versus faith, freedom versus safety. But what no one tells you is the box was built by someone else, and the real heresy is asking why the box exists at all. That's where the truth lives. Outside the permitted range, beyond the acceptable menu of beliefs. Once you step out of that range, you don't just get opposition, you get erasure. You're not debated. You're deleted, because your voice threatens the architecture, and that architecture is sacred to the machine. Belief as social currency. How convictions are bought and sold. Do you really believe what you believe? Or do you believe it because it earns you something? Respect, status, inclusion, pity, power. Beliefs are sold like fashion. They go in style, they go out. And most people wear them like clothes to fit in, to be seen, to avoid being targeted. But the truth doesn't trend. The truth doesn't care if it offends. It just is. Yet most people will trade it for applause, for a seat at the table, for peace. That's how deep the programming goes. You weren't taught to think. You were taught to perform. And the audience is always watching. The belief enforcers, teachers, preachers, and screens. Every society has its priests. They may wear suits. They may wear robes. They may wear lab coats or uniforms. But they all serve the same function, to tell you what is real. Teachers don't just teach facts. They teach frames. They teach what is worthy of belief. Preachers don't just offer salvation. They define what you must never question. Media doesn't just inform. It sets emotional parameters. This is good. This is evil. This is safe. This is threat. The enforcers of belief are not all evil. Most think they're doing good. That's what makes them effective. Because when the prison guard believes the cage is holy, he'll lock the doors with pride. The fear behind the faith, why we hold what hurts us. Have you ever wondered why people cling to beliefs that destroy them? Why victims defend the systems that harmed them? Why oppressed communities worship the very texts that enslaved them? Why sick people trust the industries that never cured them? It's not ignorance. It's terror. The terror of admitting, I've lived a lie. That moment would shatter them. So instead, they double down. They pray harder. They obey more. They shout louder because belief is not about truth. It's about identity. And once belief becomes who you are, any attack on the belief feels like an attack on your soul. That's how they trap you. Not by argument, but by attachment. The belief collapse when the structure cracks. But some of you've already felt it. The tremor, the doubt, the moment when the belief didn't hold. When the hero was a fraud. When the institution lied. When the numbers didn't add up. When the smile on their face hid a knife. And in that moment, you didn't just lose an idea. You lost a layer of your identity. You felt the architecture cracking beneath your feet. That's not madness. That's awakening. Because when one belief dies, a door opens. Not to despair, but to reality. To see without the filters. To stand in the raw light. To rebuild, not from suggestion, but from experience. This is where truth begins, and this is where fear tries to stop you. Building a mind without walls, so now what? Once the architecture collapses, what do you build in its place? The answer is not nothing. The answer is awareness. To see belief as a tool, to never mistake it for absolute, to hold it lightly, to test it ruthlessly, to update it without shame. This is the mind they fear, not the obedient, not the hysterical, but the skeptic, the one who thinks beneath the frame, the one who asks, who benefits if I believe this, the one who doesn't just exit the matrix, but sees how it was built. Final words, quiet, powerful, disruptive. You were not born to inherit belief. You were born to confront it, to break it, to bleed it, to bury it when it rots. Then, and only then, can you begin to know something real. Truth isn't inside belief. It's what survives after belief is gone. Welcome to the third chamber. The more people believe it, the more likely it is to be a lie. Have you ever felt it? That moment when a room agrees too quickly, when everyone nods too easily, when every voice echoes the same phrase, like a ritual, like a chant, like fear disguised as unity, that is consensus. And it has been used not to reveal truth, but to bury it, because the truth does not need majority approval. It does not seek votes. It does not bow to polls. It simply is. But in a world engineered for control, they taught you the opposite. They taught you to trust the crowd, to follow the group, to equate popularity with proof, consensus with certainty, and in doing so, they erased reality. This is the myth of consensus, and today we kill it. Why the crowd obeys itself? Humans are tribal. That's not evil, it's survival. We look to others to know what is safe, what is true, what is right. But what happens when the crowd is wrong? What happens when the group has been fed the same lie, and everyone is just copying each other? You get a loop, an echo, a cascade of obedience that feels like truth but is only momentum. This is the heart of consensus. It doesn't emerge from independent thought. It emerges from fear of isolation, because to stand alone is terrifying. So we mimic, we comply, we protect our social skin, even if it means sacrificing what we see. Manufactured agreement, how consensus is engineered. Here's the deeper truth. Most consensus isn't natural, it's constructed through media, through algorithms, through repetition. They don't need to convince everyone. They just need to look like everyone agrees. A few headlines, a handful of influencers, a surge of bots, a government spokesperson, a survey no one can verify. And suddenly, you feel outnumbered, even when you're not. That's how illusion works. It doesn't change reality. It changes perception of majority. They control the illusion of consensus, and the world follows that illusion into silence. The science lie when data becomes dogma. You've heard it 100 times. The science is settled. The experts agree. Everyone knows. Let me tell you a secret. Real science is never settled. It evolves. It questions. It refines. But what they call science today is often not inquiry. It's doctrine, because consensus is easy to manipulate when the careers, grants, and reputations of scientists depend on conformity. If you publish what's acceptable, you get funded. If you challenge the core narrative, you get blacklisted. That's not science. That's theology in a lab coat. And the crowd believes it, because it wears the costume of authority. Consensus as control, the prison of public agreement. Consensus has become the new god. To question it is heresy. And so we build prisons out of politeness. We don't say what we think. We wait to see what others say. We post what's trending. We signal agreement. We join the hive, because the punishment for dissent is exile. You won't get shot. You'll get cancelled, ignored, deplatformed, labeled, diagnosed. You'll be made to look insane, even when you're right. That's how the system protects itself, not by proving its beliefs are true, but by making disagreement social suicide, the herd of the righteous, when morality becomes mob. There is no consensus more dangerous than the moral one. When a crowd believes they are good, they will do evil with a smile. History proves this. Every witch hunt, every genocide, every book burning, every forced confession was done by people who said, "We are the majority. We are right. We are moral." Consensus gives people permission to destroy what they fear. And the more righteous they feel, the more cruel they become. Because the herd doesn't think. It just protects itself. And if you become the infection, you will be cleanse asterisk, standing alone, the anatomy of the outsider. But some of you were born wrong. Wrong for the times, wrong for the consensus, wrong for the narrative. And you felt it. The silence after you speak. The eyes that narrow. The laughter that doesn't reach the eyes. The isolation you were never supposed to fit, because your mind was built outside the echo. You weren't made for consensus. You were made for clarity, and clarity is lonely, but it is real. You don't need a crowd to see. You just need courage to hold the line, even when you're alone, especially when you're alone. From collapse to authority, reclaiming the right to disagree. There's power in standing against the consensus, not because you enjoy conflict, but because you've remembered something the world forgot. Truth is not democratic. It does not bow to opinion. It does not change with fashion. It does not tremble before crowds. Truth waits, and when the consensus collapses, as it always does, it's the outsider who rebuilds, not the ones who followed, but the ones who dared to stand in fire. That is your role, not to be agreed with, not to be liked, but to be awake. Final words whispered like a prophecy. The herd is large, but it is hollow. It marches in circles, chanting safety, worshipping sameness. Let them walk. You were never meant to follow. You were meant to see, and now you do. Welcome to the fourth fracture, and prepare, because the next will burn. If you see what they won't, they'll call you insane. They told you to trust the experts, to believe the therapists, to listen to the authorities, to obey the diagnosis. But what if the diagnosis was a tool? What if sanity was not a state of mind, but a standard of compliance? In this chapter, we reveal the darkest stage of all, the theater of sanity. Because when the lie is too big to expose, and the truth too dangerous to confront, they don't argue with you, they don't debate you, they medicalize you. Asterisk the birth of clinical control. In ancient times, they called you possessed, a heretic, a lunatic. Now, they call you unstable, a risk, a patient. The terms change. The chains remain. You see, the more society wanted to appear enlightened, the more it needed a clinical vocabulary to suppress dissent. So it built an empire of labels, an empire where emotion is disorder, where anger is dysfunction, where trauma is pathology, where rebellion is a syndrome, where questioning the system is a mental event. This was not science. It was social engineering. With a prescription pad. Asterisk sanity as a spectrum of obedience. What is sanity? Ask 100 doctors, and you'll get 100 models. But beneath them all, one truth. Sanity means predictability. The system doesn't care if you're in pain. It cares if you function. Go to work, pay your taxes, agree with the norm, numb the edge. That's sanity. Now ask, what happens if you don't? What if you cry at injustice? What if you scream when the world smiles? What if you can't adapt to a broken society? They'll ask what's wrong with you. Never the world, because in the theater of sanity, the play must go on, and anyone who breaks character is sedated. The pharmaceutical messiah. Enter the pills, the magic cure, the shortcut to normal. You're anxious, medicate. You're grieving, medicate. You're angry, medicate. You're awake, medicate. This is not compassion. This is chemical compliance. They don't need to burn you. They just numb you, softly, quietly, so you can go back to smiling, back to silence, back to being a cog that doesn't creak. But here's what they won't tell you. Many of the world's greatest minds, the prophets, the artists, the scientists, the seers, would be institutionalized today because they didn't fit, because they felt too much, because they didn't play along. But we don't want prophets anymore. We want performers, pathologizing dissent. When truth becomes illness, let me be clear. Mental health is real. Suffering is real. But what happens when the truth becomes diagnosable? When questioning the system is labeled as paranoia? When refusing compliance is called oppositional disorder? When isolation from a corrupt culture is called delusion? This is not healing. This is gaslighting at scale, and the scariest part, they convince you it's for your own good, so you walk into the institution willingly. You swallow the pill. You erase the memory. You perform normality. You say you feel better, but inside you feel dead, because the soul does not thrive in cages, even if the cage is padded. Institutions of the invisible. Hammer, let's talk about where it happens. The clinic, the classroom, the courtroom, the boardroom, the family dinner. Every institution now plays its role in enforcing the performance of normal. Speak too loud. You're unstable. Show too much emotion. You're unwell. Refuse a narrative. You're dangerous. There are no prisons in this theater. Only diagnoses. And those diagnoses are powerful because they make your words invalid. They take your scream and translate it into symptom. And once you're labeled, you can be ignored. Pity replaces respect, and the truth dies in a white room. The silent resistance. Those who refuse the role, but some of you never fit the role. You never felt the applause. You saw through the costumes. You cried when others laughed. You screamed when others sat silent. You questioned when others obeyed. They told you that made you broken. But what if it made you honest? In a world that's insane with its own deception, sanity becomes a rebellion, and refusing to perform becomes sacred. You are not wrong for feeling too deeply, for not numbing out, for not fitting in. You are not sick. You are awake, and that, it's terrifying to a world built on sleep, becoming the unapologetic mind. So what now? You stop apologizing. You stop explaining yourself to people who've never understood the sickness of the system. You stop chasing the approval of a culture that needs. You medicate it to feel comfortable. You stop waiting for permission to be real. Your fire will scare them. Your vision will offend them. Your voice will disrupt the play. Good, let it. This world does not need more well-adjusted performers. It needs fierce, broken, relentless minds who refuse to act sane in an insane world. Be that you were never insane. You were surrounded by illusions, and chose to see. That choice made you a threat, but it also made you whole. You are not a patient. You are not a disorder. You are not a file in a drawer. You are the glitch, the signal, the end of the show. Welcome to the fifth law. The curtain is tearing. They told you safety was sacred, so you gave them your soul. Look around. Cameras, codes, locks, alerts, warnings, announcements, policies, protocols, helplines, surveillance. You think this is protection. You think this is wisdom. You think this is progress. But what if it's not safety at all? What if it's submission? What if the very thing you were told would save you is what made you forget how to live? This is the religion of safety, and its God does not love you. It watches, it warns, it punishes, and worst of all, it makes you grateful for your cage. Asterisk, the myth of the safe world. They taught you that the world was dangerous, but what they didn't say was that they would use that danger to own you. The promise of safety was never meant to protect you. It was meant to pacify you, to make you sit down, to make you say yes, to make you fear freedom more than slavery. Because true freedom is dangerous. It means risk. It means discomfort. It means pain. But safety is sold as comfort, as virtue, as modern, as kind. And in that sale they removed your spine. Asterisk, the architecture of control, wrapped in warnings, everything now has a warning label. Everything has a term of service. Everything has a gate. But what are they protecting you from? Chaos? Harm? Yourself? No, they are protecting the system from you, because if you were truly unsafe, you might ask dangerous questions. You might feel dangerous things. You might remember what it was like to be untamed. So they wrapped your instincts in bubble wrap. They padded your mind with slogans. They replaced your courage with a checkbox. Now you live in a soft cage and call it progress. But softness is not freedom. It's suffocation. The false prophets of protection, there are high priests of this religion. And you know their voices. Do this for your safety. Stay home for others. Comply for the greater good. Trust us. It's safer this way. Governments, corporations, medical boards, news anchors, school counselors, security firms, they don't ask for belief. They ask for surrender. Because the safest citizen is the most obedient one. And if you question their commandments, you are labeled a threat. Not to people, but to order. This isn't safety. It's a soft totalitarianism. And it grows because it smiles. The trade, safety for sovereignty. Let's talk about the cost. Every time you chose safety, you gave something up. A right, a thought, a freedom, a relationship, a breath. You may not have noticed, but the trade was always there. And now, you live in a world of digital fences, of quiet laws, of invisible rules written by people you'll never meet in rooms. You'll never enter for reasons you'll never know, and the excuse will always be the same, your safety, but you were never in danger until you believed them. Asterisk. The infantilization of the masses' safety culture did something else. Something deeper. It infantilized you. It made you a child in your own mind, dependent, timid, helpless. You were taught not to trust yourself, not to trust your instincts, not to trust your strength. You were taught to wait for guidance, to check for approval, to ask for permission. You were taught that discomfort is a crisis, that disagreement is harm, that challenge is abuse. That's not safety. That's psychological sedation. And sedation feels peaceful until you realize you're in a coma. Safe language, safe thoughts, safe death. It didn't stop with rules. It entered your speech. You were told to use safer words, to avoid offense, to filter every sentence through a moral lens. You were told to soften your anger, to shrink your ideas, to flatten your expression. But the safest speech is the one that says nothing. And the safest thought is the one you don't have. You weren't just made physically safe. You were made intellectually impotent. Because the more safety is worshipped, the less truth survives. And in the name of being safe, you died. Not in body, but in soul. Reclaiming the sacred risk. Now listen carefully. You will not survive this world by being safe. You will survive it by being whole. And wholeness is dangerous. It will make you speak when others tremble. It will make you move when others freeze. It will make you risk being hated in a world that confuses love with approval. Real safety comes from sovereignty. From knowing you can face the pain, from choosing discomfort over submission, from remembering you were not born to be protected, you were born to be powerful. So shatter the rule book, tear the sticker off the box, break the glass that says, for your safety, and walk back into the real world, unwrapped, unmasked, unafraid. You were not protected. You were trained to obey, to shrink, to surrender. But you are not a child. You are not a file. You are not their subject. You are not safe. You are free, and that is the greatest danger of all. Welcome to the sixth fracture. Prepare, because the final one is no longer quiet.